You are listening to HOA Mess. This is the pettiest property line war ever. I am standing in my backyard holding a fence permit application printed on standard white paper, and Janet with no notice is screaming at me that I never filed anything, and if I do not stop construction right now, the fine will be $500 per day, starting immediately. My name is David. I am an appliance repair tech in Boston, Massachusetts. I moved here 6 months ago because I needed a reset. My mental health had been fragile for years, and the constant noise and pressure of my old city were pushing me to the edge. I thought Golden Mesa Estates Association would be quiet, orderly, maybe even boring. The HOA website promised clear rules and fair enforcement. What I got was a neighborhood where every backyard upgrade becomes a committee argument, and Janet, full name Deborah Cooper, the treasurer who weaponizes fees, decided I was her personal project the moment I submitted my fence application. She is standing 3 feet from me right now, hands on her hips, wearing a white cardigan and a pink baseball cap, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, and a key ring with too many keys jingling loudly every time she gestures. The drizzle is getting heavier, forcing us both under the eave of my back porch, but she does not care. She is waving a stack of papers at me like a weapon, and I can see the HOA letterhead on the top sheet. Your paperwork is cute, mine has a letterhead, she says, and her voice is so sharp it could cut glass. I hold up my permit application. I filed this 3 weeks ago. I have the confirmation email. I have the receipt from the city planning office. I followed every single rule in the Golden Mesa covenants. She laughs. It is not a friendly laugh. It is the sound of someone who knows she has power and plans to use it. If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive, she says. You did not file with the HOA Architectural Committee. You filed with the city. Those are two different things. The city does not care about our setback requirements. We do. And you are in violation. The contractor, a guy named Luis, is standing 10 feet away next to a stack of fence panels wrapped in plastic. He has a tool bag slung over his shoulder and a confused look on his face. He walked up mid-argument, and now he is waiting for me to tell him whether to start digging post holes or pack up and leave. I take a breath. The drizzle is cold on my neck. I can feel my pulse hammering in my temples. Janet is waiting for me to fold. She thinks I will apologize, cancel the contractor, and start over with her architectural committee, which will take another 6 weeks and probably cost me another few $100s in application fees. But I kept my phone in my pocket because I was saving one clip for the finale. I pull out my phone and show her the email thread. The HOA Architectural Committee chair, a woman named Susan, approved my fence plan 2 weeks ago. The email is right there. I forwarded it to Janet 3 days ago. Janet does not even look at the screen. She waves her hand like she is swatting a fly. Susan does not have unilateral authority. The full board has to vote. And we did not vote. So you do not have approval. Luis shifts his weight and clears his throat. Do you want me to start or not? I have another job at 2. Janet whips around and points at him. If you touch a single post hole, I will personally report you to the contractor licensing board for working without proper authorization. Luis looks at me. I look at Janet. She is smiling now, and it is the kind of smile that makes my skin crawl. I say, the management office closes at 5. I have 1 shot to deliver the dispute packet in person. If I do not get there in time, this drags out another week, and Janet knows it. She planned this ambush for exactly this moment. She crosses her arms. If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive. I tell Luis to hold off for now. He nods, picks up his tool bag, and walks back to his truck. Janet watches him go, and then she turns back to me and says, "You will receive a formal notice of violation by the end of the day. You have 72 hours to submit a corrective action plan. If you do not comply, the fines start. And trust me, they add up fast." She walks away, her keys jingling with every step. I stand there in the drizzle, holding my phone and my permit application, and I realize that this is not about the fence. This is about control. Janet has been on the board for 8 years. She runs the HOA like her personal fiefdom. And she does not like it when people follow the rules without asking her permission first. The next morning, I wake up to an email blast sent to the entire Golden Mesa Estates community. The subject line is "Compliance Reminder," and the body of the email is a passive-aggressive essay about how one resident refuses community standards and how important it is for everyone to follow the architectural review process. My name is not mentioned, but everyone knows who it is about. My next-door neighbor, a retired teacher named Carol, texts me a screenshot with a single word: "Yikes." I call the management office. The woman who answers, her name is Linda, sounds tired. She tells me that Janet filed a formal complaint and that the board scheduled a surprise hearing for tomorrow night. I was not notified. I was not invited. And according to Linda, the board is planning to prevent me from speaking at all. I ask if that is legal. Linda sighs and says technically you have the right to attend any board meeting, but they can limit public comment to 3 minutes, and they can vote on enforcement actions without your input. I hang up and sit at my kitchen table. My hands are shaking. I have a shift in 20 minutes. I repair refrigerators and dishwashers for a living, and I am always getting called mid-shift because someone's ice maker is leaking or their dryer is making a grinding noise. I do not have time for this. I do not have the mental bandwidth for this. But if I do not fight back, Janet will bury me. I text my ally, a city code enforcement officer named Ray. I met him 2 months ago when I called about a zoning question. He is the one who told me that the HOA was misrepresenting the city setback ordinance. I ask if he can come to the hearing tomorrow night. He texts back, "I will be there." The hearing is held in the Golden Mesa Clubhouse, a bland beige building with fake wood paneling and fluorescent lights. I arrive 15 minutes early. Janet is already there, sitting at the head of the table with 3 other board members. She sees me walk in and her smile gets wider. Ray shows up 5 minutes later. He is wearing his city uniform, a navy polo with the code enforcement badge embroidered on the chest. He sits in the back row and nods at me. The board president, a man named Mark, calls the meeting to order. He reads the agenda. There are 3 items: approval of last month's minutes, discussion of pool maintenance bids, and enforcement action against 47 Maple Court. That is my address. Mark looks at me. "You have 3 minutes to respond to the notice of violation." I stand up. I have my folder with the permit application, the email from Susan, the city confirmation, and the survey map. I start to explain that I followed the process, that I filed with both the city and the HOA Architectural Committee, that Susan approved the design, and that the setback measurements are fully compliant with the city ordinance. Janet interrupts. She does not raise her hand. She does not wait for Mark to recognize her. She just starts talking. The city ordinance is irrelevant. We have our own setback requirements in the covenants. And the architectural committee approval was conditional. You were supposed to submit final measurements before breaking ground. You did not do that. I look at Susan. She is sitting next to Janet, and she will not make eye contact with me. I realize in that moment that she is not going to back me up. A board member admits I am right, but refuses to say it on the record. I say, I submitted the final measurements in the same email where Susan approved the design. I can show you the attachment right now. Janet cuts me off again. Your 3 minutes are up. Mark nods. We will take this under advisement and vote at the end of the meeting. I sit down. Ray stands up. He does not ask for permission. He just starts talking. I am Ray Delgado, City Code Enforcement. I reviewed this case. The fence plan submitted by the resident at 47 Maple Court is fully compliant with the city setback ordinance. The HOA covenant language about setbacks does not override the city code. If the HOA is claiming a stricter standard, they need to provide documentation that the covenant was filed with the county and that it does not conflict with municipal law. Janet's face goes red. This is an HOA matter. The city has no jurisdiction here. Ray smiles. Actually, if you are threatening fines based on a covenant that contradicts the city ordinance, that is a legal issue. And if you are preventing a resident from making improvements that are otherwise lawful, that could be considered harassment. Mark looks uncomfortable. He shuffles his papers. He says, we will take that under advisement as well. The meeting drags on for another 40 minutes. They approve the pool bids. They argue about whether to repaint the clubhouse trim. And then, at the very end, Mark calls for a vote on my enforcement action. Janet makes a motion to impose a $500 fine and to require me to submit a new architectural application with revised setback measurements. Susan seconds the motion. The vote is 3-1. The one dissenting vote is from a guy named Paul who looks miserable the entire time. The minutes record the reversal and the reason. Paul states on the record that the original approval was valid and that the fine is punitive. But he is outvoted. Janet stands up as soon as the vote is done. She gathers her papers and walks toward the door. I follow her into the hallway. Ray is right behind me. I say, you know this is not about the setback. You know I followed the rules. This is about you not liking that I did not ask your permission. She stops and turns around. Her keys jingle. If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive. I pull out my phone. I have been recording since the moment I walked into the clubhouse. I play back her voice from earlier in the meeting. The city ordinance is irrelevant. We have our own setback requirements in the covenants. Ray raises his eyebrows. That is going to be a problem for you, he says to Janet. Because the city ordinance is not irrelevant. And if you are fining residents based on rules that do not exist, that is fraud. Janet's face goes from red to white. She does not say anything. She just turns and walks out. The door slams behind her. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare tales. Ray and I walk back to my truck. He tells me to file a formal complaint with the city and to request a written determination on the setback ordinance. He says it will take about a week, but once I have that document, the HOA will not have any legal ground to stand on. I thank him and drive home. When I get there, I see a roll of caution tape stretched across my yard, tied between two fence posts that I had installed last week as markers. There is no notice attached, no explanation. just the tape, fluttering in the wind. I take a picture. I add it to my evidence folder, and then I rip the tape down and throw it in the trash. The next day I get a call from Luis, the contractor. He sounds stressed. He says that Janet showed up at his shop this morning and told him that if he starts work on my fence, she will report him to the licensing board and the Better Business Bureau. She also told him that the HOA has a preferred contractor list, and that he is not on it, and that if he wants to work in Golden Mesa in the future, he should walk away from my job. I ask if he is going to walk away. He hesitates. He says, "I do not want trouble with the HOA. But I also do not like being threatened. Give me a day to think about it." I hang up and call Ray. I tell him what Janet did. He tells me to document it and to let Luis know that the HOA does not have the authority to block a licensed contractor from working on private property. I call Luis back and tell him what Ray said. I also offer to pay him an extra $200 for the hassle. He agrees to start work the next morning. That night, I get another email from the HOA. This one is from Mark, the board president. It is a formal notice that I have 72 hours to submit a corrective action plan or the fines will begin. The email includes a PDF attachment with the HOA covenant language about setbacks. I read it 3 times. It is vague. It says that all fences must be installed in accordance with applicable local codes and HOA aesthetic guidelines. There is no specific measurement. There is no definition of what the setback should be. I forward the email to Ray and ask if this is enforceable. He replies within 10 minutes, no. The covenant does not establish a clear standard. If they try to fine you based on this, you can challenge it in small claims court and you will probably win. I screenshot his email and add it to my evidence folder. Luis shows up at 7 in the morning. He brings his crew, 2 guys who speak mostly Spanish and work fast. They start digging post holes along the property line. I watch from my kitchen window. Everything is going smoothly until Janet pulls up in her car at 7:45. She parks in front of my house and gets out. She is holding a clipboard. She walks straight into my backyard without knocking on my door. I grab my phone and head outside. She is standing next to Luis, waving the clipboard in his face. I can hear her from 20 feet away. This is an active violation. You are installing a structure without proper HOA approval. I am ordering you to stop work immediately. Luis looks at me. I walk over and say, "He has my permission. This is my property. And I have city approval and HOA architectural committee approval." Janet does not even look at me. She keeps talking to Luis. "If you continue, I will file a complaint with the State Contractor Licensing Board. I will also report this to the city building inspector. And I will personally ensure that you never work in this neighborhood again." Luis takes a step back. He looks at his crew. They have stopped digging and are watching. I pull out my phone and start recording. I say, "You are trespassing on my property. You are threatening my contractor, and you are interfering with lawful construction. I have everything you just said on video." Janet finally looks at me. Her face is tight. Her keys are jingling. If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive. I say, "You already repeated yourself. Twice. And everyone just heard it on the recording." She stares at me for a long moment. Then she turns and walks back to her car. But before she gets in, she takes a picture of the fence line with her phone. She does not say anything. She just drives away. Luis exhales. He says, "That woman is crazy." I say I know. But we are not stopping. He nods. His crew gets back to work. 2 hours later, a delivery truck shows up with the rest of the fence panels. The driver, a young guy with a beard, parks in front of my house and starts unloading. Janet pulls up again. She gets out of her car and walks up to the driver. I watch from the porch. I can hear her talking. She is telling him that the delivery is not authorized, that the HOA has not approved the fence, and that he should refuse to deliver the materials. The driver looks confused. He says, "I have a work order. I am just dropping off the panels." Janet says, "I am the HOA treasurer. I am telling you that this delivery is in violation of community covenants. If you proceed, you will be liable for any damages." The driver looks at me. I walk over and say, "I paid for these panels. I have a receipt. Deliver them." Janet steps between us. She says, "I am ordering you to leave." The driver looks at her and says, "Do you have legal authority to block a delivery on private property?" Janet does not answer. She just stands there with her arms crossed. The driver shrugs and starts unloading the panels. Janet takes more pictures with her phone. She gets back in her car and drives away. I help the driver stack the panels in my driveway. He finishes in 20 minutes and leaves. Luis and his crew work until 3 in the afternoon. By the end of the day, they have installed 8 fence posts and 2 full panels. The fence is starting to take shape. I stand in the backyard and look at it. It is clean. It is straight. It is exactly what I planned. And it is driving Janet insane. That night, I get an email from the City Code Enforcement Office. It is a certified copy of the setback ordinance determination. Ray attached a cover letter explaining that the city setback requirement is 6 inches from the property line, and that my fence plan meets that requirement. The letter also states that the HOA covenant language does not establish a different standard, and that any attempt to enforce a stricter requirement would need to be documented and filed with the county as a deed restriction, which Golden Mesa never did. I print the letter. I put it in a folder. I add it to the evidence stack. The next morning, I get a certified letter from the HOA. It is a formal notice of fine. $500 per day, starting from the day the contractor began digging post holes. The letter says that I have 10 days to pay, or the HOA will place a lien on my property. I call Ray. He tells me to file a dispute with the HOA management company and to send them a copy of the city determination. He also tells me to prepare for small claims court because Janet is not going to back down. I draft a response letter. I attach the city determination. I include a timeline of events, screenshots of the emails, and a copy of the recording where Janet threatened Luis. I send it to the HOA management company and request a formal review. 2 days later, I get a reply from Linda, the woman at the management office. She says that the board reviewed my dispute and voted to uphold the fine. She also says that the board scheduled another hearing for next week and that I am required to attend. I show the email to Ray. He says, "They are digging their own grave. Keep everything. We are going to need it." The second hearing is worse than the first. Janet brings a PowerPoint presentation. She has photos of my fence at various stages of construction. She has printed copies of the covenant language. She has a timeline showing when I filed the city permit and when I allegedly failed to file with the HOA. I sit in the back row with Ray. I let her talk. She goes on for 15 minutes. She shows the board a photo of the property line and claims that my fence is 2 inches over the setback. She does not provide any measurements. She does not provide a survey. She just points at a picture and says, "You can see it right there." When she finishes, Mark asks if I have anything to say. I stand up. I walk to the front of the room. I hand Mark a copy of the city determination letter. I hand him a copy of the email from Susan approving my fence plan. I hand him a copy of the recording transcript where Janet threatened Luis. I say, "The city has confirmed that my fence meets the setback requirement. The HOA Architectural Committee approved my design. And the treasurer has been harassing me and my contractor in violation of the law. I am requesting that the board reverse the fine and issue a formal apology." Janet laughs. She actually laughs. She says, "Your paperwork is cute. Mine has a letterhead." I smile. I pull out my phone. I play the recording of her saying that exact line 3 weeks ago. Then I play the recording of her threatening Luis. Then I play the recording of her telling the delivery driver to leave. The room goes silent. Mark looks at Janet. Susan looks at the floor. Paul, the guy who voted against the fine last time, is shaking his head. I say, "I kept my phone in my pocket because I was saving one clip for the finale." I pull out one more document. It is a certified copy of the HOA records showing that Janet is not in good standing with her own dues. She is 3 months behind on her quarterly assessment. According to the Golden Mesa covenants, any board member who is delinquent on dues forfeits their voting privileges until the account is current. I hand the document to Mark. I say, "I use this to trigger an internal audit and the board panics in real time." Mark reads the document. His face goes pale. He looks at Janet. "Janet, is this accurate?" Janet does not answer. She stands up. She gathers her papers. She says, "I do not have to sit here and listen to this." She walks toward the door. Mark says, "Janet, wait. We need to address this." She does not stop. She walks out. The door slams. Karen storms out when the vote goes against her, and everyone sees it. Mark calls for a recess. The board members huddle in the corner. Ray leans over and whispers, "You just blew this thing wide open." After 10 minutes, Mark reconvenes the meeting. He says, "In light of the new information, the board is voting to rescind the fine against 47 Maple Court. We are also voting to suspend enforcement actions pending a full review of the architectural approval process." Paul makes the motion. Susan seconds it. The vote is 3-0. Janet is not there to vote. Mark looks at me. He says, "We apologize for the confusion. Your fence project is approved. You may proceed." I nod. I do not say anything. I just gather my papers and walk out. Ray follows me to the parking lot. He says, "That was the most satisfying thing I have seen in 6 months." I say, "It is not over yet. She is going to come after me again." He says, "Let her try. You have everything documented. And now the board knows she is dirty." The next day, I get an email from Linda. It is a formal notice that the HOA has waived all fines against my property. The email includes a written directive that Janet is not permitted to contact me or enter my property without my explicit consent. A fine waiver in writing, with a firm no-contact directive. I print the email and add it to the folder. Luis finishes the fence 3 days later. It is perfect. 6 feet tall, cedar panels, black posts, exactly as designed. I stand in the backyard and look at it. It is the first thing I have built in this neighborhood that feels like mine. 2 weeks later, I get a notice in the mail. It is from the county clerk. Janet filed a small claims lawsuit against me for defamation and harassment. She is asking for $10,000 in damages. I call Ray. He tells me to get a lawyer. I call a guy named Tom, a real estate attorney who has handled HOA cases before. He reviews my evidence folder and says, "You are going to win this." She does not have a case. The hearing is scheduled for a Tuesday morning in a courthouse hallway. I show up at 8. Janet is already there with her lawyer, a woman in a gray suit who looks annoyed. Tom and I sit on a bench and wait. At 8:15, the bailiff calls us into the courtroom. The judge is a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and reading glasses. She looks at the file and says, "This is a small claims defamation case. Miss Cooper, you are alleging that Mr. Hayes made false statements about you. What are those statements?" Janet's lawyer stands up and says, "Mr. Hayes publicly accused Miss Cooper of harassment, fraud, and abuse of authority. He made these statements at an HOA board meeting and shared recordings with other residents." The judge looks at me. "Mr. Hayes, do you have a response?" Tom stands up. "Your Honor, my client documented a pattern of harassment and retaliation by Miss Cooper, who is the HOA treasurer. The recordings are accurate, the statements are true, and truth is an absolute defense to defamation." The judge nods. "Do you have evidence?" Tom hands her the folder. She flips through it. She listens to the recordings on her laptop. She reads the city determination letter. She reads the HOA board meeting minutes. She looks at the photos of the caution tape and the fence. After 20 minutes, she looks at Janet. "Miss Cooper, it appears that Mr. Hayes has documented a substantial amount of evidence supporting his claims. Do you have any evidence that his statements were false?" Janet's lawyer hesitates. She says, "Your Honor, the issue is not whether the statements are true, but whether they were made with malicious intent." The judge raises an eyebrow. Malicious intent is not a factor in defamation if the statements are true. "Do you have any evidence that Mr. Hayes lied?" Janet's lawyer does not answer. The judge closes the file. Case dismissed. "Mr. Hayes, you are free to go." "Miss Cooper, you are responsible for court costs." Janet stands up. Her face is red. She starts to say something, but her lawyer grabs her arm and pulls her out of the courtroom. Tom and I walk out into the hallway. He says, "That was easy." I say, "It is not over. She is going to appeal." He says, "Let her. You have everything you need." 3 months later, the Golden Mesa Estates Association holds a special election. Janet is removed from the board by a vote of the membership. The new board adopts a clear fence policy with a neutral appeal process and proof standards. They also hire a new management company and conduct an internal audit of all enforcement actions from the past 2 years. I get a check in the mail for $1,200. It is a refund of all the fees I paid during the fence dispute, plus reimbursement for my legal costs. The check comes with a letter from the new board president apologizing for the way I was treated. I frame the letter and hang it in my garage, right next to the fence permit. I still live in Golden Mesa. I still repair appliances. I still see Janet sometimes driving through the neighborhood. She does not look at me. She does not wave. She just drives past, her keyring jingling somewhere inside her car. The fence is still standing. The cone is still placed by the stake, a little monument to the absurdity of it all. and every time I look at it, I remember that I won. Not because I was louder or meaner, but because I kept my receipts, I kept my cool, and I made them prove their case. The HOA lost in small claims, paid my fees, and was forced to adopt a clear fence policy with a neutral appeal process and proof standards. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next HOA story.